The marble floors of the penthouse gleamed under the soft white lights, polished so perfectly they reflected every movement like water frozen in time. The space smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and expensive coffee, a place designed to look untouched by real life. Everything had a place. Everything had a rule. And every rule belonged to Adrian Wolfe. He stood near the kitchen island, one hand resting on the cold stone surface, his posture straight, his presence commanding even in silence. His tailored charcoal suit looked as sharp as his gaze, as if he were heading to a boardroom instead of standing in his own kitchen. He had come home earlier than usual, a rare break between meetings, expecting peace and order. Instead, he found the refrigerator door open. Maria stood in front of it, her back slightly bent, one hand resting on the door handle as though she had been caught mid-breath. The soft hum of the fridge filled the room, stretching the moment painfully thin. Shelves inside glowed with neatly arranged containers, imported fruits wrapped carefully, bottles aligned like soldiers. It was a sight few people ever saw up close. "What do you think you're doing?" Adrian's voice cut through the air, calm but edged with steel. Maria flinched. Slowly, she turned around. She was a small woman, her hair tied back in a simple bun, strands of gray visible despite her attempts to keep it neat. Her uniform was clean but worn, the fabric thinned from years of careful washing. Her eyes widened when she saw him, and her hand slipped from the fridge door, letting it close with a soft click that sounded far too loud in the silence. I was just cleaning, sir," she said quietly. Adrian's eyes moved from her face to the refrigerator, then back again. "Cleaning," he repeated, as if testing the word. "Since when does cleaning involve opening my refrigerator?" Maria's fingers curled into her apron. "Sometimes spills happen, sir. I just wanted to make sure." "I have staff for food management," he interrupted. "That's not your responsibility." She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, I know." Adrian took a step forward. His shoes made no sound on the floor, yet Maria instinctively stepped back. He hated disorder. He hated unpredictability. Most of all, he hated people crossing boundaries he had clearly defined. "I have rules in this house," he said evenly. "One of them is very simple. You don't touch what doesn't belong to you." Maria lowered her gaze to the floor, staring at the reflection of her own shoes. "I understand, sir. Do you?" His voice sharpened. "Because I caught you doing exactly what I told you never to do." The words hung between them, heavy and accusing. Maria's throat tightened. She wanted to explain, but the fear sat deep in her chest, pressing down every thought. She had worked in this house for 6 years. 6 years of quiet footsteps, careful hands, and invisible presence. She had followed every rule because she needed this job more than she could ever say out loud. "I wasn't," she began, then stopped herself. Adrian folded his arms. "You weren't what?" She hesitated. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I wasn't stealing." His eyes hardened. "That makes it worse." Maria looked up, startled. "Sir, if you weren't stealing, then you were snooping," he said. "Either way, it's unacceptable." Her lips parted, but no words followed. Tears stung her eyes, though she fought them back with all her strength. Crying had never helped her before. It only made people uncomfortable. Or angry. "I'm sorry," she said instead. "I didn't mean to break any rules." Adrian exhaled sharply, the sound filled with irritation rather than relief. "Intentions don't change actions." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I won't tolerate dishonesty in my home." Maria's heart dropped. She recognized that tone. She had heard it once before, years ago, when another staff member had disappeared without explanation. "You're fired," Adrian said plainly. The words felt unreal, as if they belonged to someone else's life. Maria's breath caught. "Sir, please," she said, her voice trembling despite her efforts. "I've never caused any trouble. I swear." "You'll be paid for the week," he continued, already typing a message. "Pack your things and leave by tonight." Her hands began to shake. She pressed them together, trying to steady herself. "Please, sir," she said again, desperation slipping through despite her restraint. "I need this job." Adrian didn't look at her. "That's not my problem." For a moment, she thought about telling him the truth. About the dizziness that had hit her that morning. About the doctor's warning. About the pills waiting in her bag. But the words felt too small against his certainty, too fragile to survive his judgment. "I understand," she said softly at last. Adrian finally looked up. Something in her voice gave him pause, but he brushed it aside immediately. Sympathy had no place in his world. Sympathy complicated things. Maria nodded once, as if sealing her own fate. She untied her apron carefully and folded it with slow, deliberate movements, the way someone does when they are trying not to fall apart. Then she turned toward the service hallway. Each step she took felt heavier than the last. The penthouse suddenly felt much larger, the silence louder. She passed the spotless living room, the tall windows overlooking a city she could never afford to live in. She wondered how she would explain this to her daughter. She wondered how long the bread at home would last. Behind her, Adrian watched without expression. To him, it was a breach of trust. To her, it was the loss of safety. When Maria disappeared down the hallway, the penthouse returned to its perfect stillness. The fridge remained closed, the rules remained intact, and Adrian Wolfe believed, without a doubt, that he had done the right thing. The penthouse felt different after Maria left, though Adrian couldn't have said why. Everything looked the same, the cushions aligned, the glass surfaces spotless, the city lights blinking beyond the windows like distant stars that never touched him. Yet the silence pressed in on him, heavier than usual, as if the apartment itself had noticed an absence he refused to name. He sat at the long dining table, a plate of perfectly arranged food cooling in front of him. The chef had prepared it hours earlier, flavors balanced, presentation flawless. Adrian lifted his fork once, then set it back down. His appetite was gone. He told himself it was exhaustion, the weight of decisions stacked one on top of another all day. He had fired people before. Staff came and went. That was how things worked. Still, his gaze drifted toward the kitchen. He stood and walked back in, intending to pour a drink. As he crossed the room, something near the counter caught his eye, something that hadn't been there before, or perhaps something he had never bothered to notice. A small paper bag sat tucked beside the sink, folded neatly at the top. It looked out of place among the steel and marble, like a fragile thing accidentally left behind in a museum. Adrian frowned and picked it up. It was lighter than he expected. Inside were 2 slices of plain white bread, carefully stacked, edges trimmed unevenly as if cut with an old knife. No wrapping, no butter, just bread. Beneath it lay a folded piece of paper, creased from being opened and closed more than once. His fingers hesitated before unfolding it. The handwriting was small and careful, every letter formed with effort. "Sir, I'm sorry. I broke your rule. I only looked because I fainted yesterday at work and the doctor said I must eat before taking my medicine. I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to lose this job. This bread is for my daughter's school lunch tomorrow. She likes it dry. Thank you for employing me all these years." The words blurred. Adrian read the note again, slower this time, as if hoping it would change. It didn't. His chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with stress or anger. He lowered himself into a chair, the paper bag still clutched in his hand. Fainted yesterday. Medicine. Didn't want to ask. His eyes drifted toward the service hallway almost against his will. He stood up again and walked down it, opening the small cabinet he had never once inspected. Inside were cleaning supplies, and behind them, a small plastic container. He pulled it out. Old pill bottles rattled softly inside, labels faded, some nearly unreadable. None of them were expensive brands. None of them belonged in a home where luxury overflowed from every corner. Adrian closed his eyes. Without warning, memories surged forward, uninvited and sharp. A cramped apartment, a fridge that hummed louder than it cooled. His mother standing in front of it, smiling too brightly, telling him she'd already eaten. Bread for dinner, bread for breakfast, bread folded into napkins and tucked into pockets, just in case. He opened his eyes again, and the present crashed into him with brutal clarity. He had stood in this kitchen, surrounded by abundance, and accused a woman of crossing boundaries because she was hungry. Because she was sick, because she was afraid. His throat tightened. He tried to swallow, but the feeling only grew stronger. The image of Maria standing there, hands shaking, eyes lowered, replayed in his mind with cruel precision. Her quiet apology, her dignity as she folded her apron. The way she hadn't begged, only asked once, softly, and then accepted his decision like someone long accustomed to losing. Adrian sank into the chair. The first tear surprised him. It fell onto the polished table, leaving a small, imperfect mark. Then another followed, and another. He brought a hand to his face, but it was useless. The dam broke completely, and the sob that escaped him was raw, uncontrolled, the kind that came from somewhere deep and old. His shoulders shook as he leaned forward, the note crumpling slightly in his grip. For years, he had believed money protected him from pain, from the past, from regret, from vulnerability. He had built rules like walls, convincing himself they were necessary. Order meant safety, distance meant control, But in protecting himself, he had become blind. Blind to the humanity of the woman who cleaned his floors. Blind to the fear behind her silence. Blind to the truth that kindness costs nothing and cruelty often wears the mask of professionalism. When the tears finally slowed, Adrian wiped his face with the back of his hand, breathing unevenly. He straightened, resolve replacing shock. He grabbed his phone. "Find Maria," he said the moment his assistant answered, his voice thick but firm. "I don't care how late it is. Find her." There was a pause. "Sir, I fired her today," he continued. "That was a mistake. Bring her back. And make sure she's safe." He ended the call before any questions could follow. That night, Adrian didn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the city pulse below, thinking about all the times he had mistaken authority for righteousness. By morning, a plan had formed, not a business one, but a human one. When Maria returned the next day, she stood stiffly near the door, clutching her worn handbag, expecting only to collect her final paycheck. Her eyes widened when she saw Adrian waiting, not behind a desk or a counter, but standing, uncertain, like someone who had rehearsed words and still feared saying them wrong. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "And I'm sorry." She stared at him, confused. "I judged you without listening," he continued. "I punished you for being human. That will not happen again." Maria's eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide this time. "I don't just want you to come back," Adrian said. "I want you to feel safe here. If you need help, medical, personal, anything, you ask." "That's not a rule. That's a promise." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Maria nodded, emotion tightening her voice. "Thank you, sir." As she turned to leave the room, Adrian glanced at the fridge, the same fridge that had started everything. It no longer looked like a symbol of control or wealth. It looked like what it should have been all along. A place where no one should ever have to be afraid to open the door.